Right now, the Weather Prediction Center in College Park, Maryland, has an active multi-day heavy rainfall threat flagged across the Midwest and Ohio Valley. A hazardous heat advisory is locked in across much of the South and Southeast through next weekend. And a moderate risk of severe storms is confirmed for parts of the Central Plains and northern Ohio Valley. And a developing tropical wave is being tracked in the Atlantic that could affect coastlines within days. This is not one weather event. This is an entire weather pattern that's turned hostile across multiple regions simultaneously. If you live anywhere from the western Dakotas to western Pennsylvania, or down through Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio, the next several days deserve your full attention. Subscribe for real, sourced weather coverage as this develops. Let's start with what's driving all of this. A broad ridge of high pressure has anchored across the southern tier of the country, keeping the south and southwest under above normal temperatures for days. And the Weather Prediction Center's latest discussion confirms it will maintain widespread heat from the western U.S. through the southern plains well into the coming week, with record highs in the triple digits expected across the south-central high plains. That stubborn dome of heat does two critical things. First, it keeps the surface hot and loaded with moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, meaning any storm that forms has enormous energy to work with. Second, it forces the jet stream and any disturbances riding it to move along the northern edge of that dome, rather than cutting straight through, funneling storm after storm into the same corridor spanning from the Central Plains across the Midwest and into the Ohio Valley. That corridor is where the serious threat lives for the next several days. The Storm Prediction Center has confirmed a severe storm threat spanning from the western Dakotas across to northwestern Ohio and into far southwestern Pennsylvania. The immediate concern is a line of significant thunderstorm complexes working through the plains and Midwest, driven by a surge of Gulf moisture streaming northward and colliding with a developing low-pressure system. When that collision happens, it doesn't produce scattered afternoon showers. It produces organized, long-lived storms capable of damaging straight-line winds, large hail, flash flooding, and tornadoes. Now let's talk about why this setup is more dangerous than a typical late-summer storm threat. Because the structure of this pattern makes it uniquely capable of producing prolonged problems, rather than a quick hit-and-move-on situation. The cold front driving this activity is moving slowly. When fronts stall or drag, storms don't just pass through once and clear out, they line up behind one another and train over the same geography, meaning the same communities get hit by heavy rain not once, but repeatedly, over hours or even multiple days. The Weather Prediction Center's extended forecast discussion has explicitly flagged this concern, noting that multiple days of slow-moving storms across the Midwest and Ohio Valley may lead to flooding. Separately, the WPC has put a slight risk of excessive rainfall in place for the Ohio Valley, Midwest, and Central High Plains, with the potential for 5 to 10 inches of rain across a single corridor over just a few days. That kind of total isn't just a nuisance. It fills rivers already running elevated from earlier summer storms. It saturates soil that no longer has capacity to absorb additional moisture. It backs up stormwater systems in cities not designed for rainfall totals of this scale in this short a time frame. All while the threat of severe individual storms remains active simultaneously, meaning people may be dealing with flash flood watches and tornado watches at the same time, in the same areas, on the same nights. The flash flood threat is especially serious for the specific geography it's targeting: southeastern Ohio, eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, and southwestern Pennsylvania. This is mountain terrain. The higher elevation of the Appalachians amplifies rainfall totals compared to surrounding lowlands. And when heavy rain falls on steep hillsides with saturated soil, water doesn't gradually drain. It rushes into valleys, fills creeks within minutes, and turns normally quiet streams into fast-moving walls of water with almost no warning. This is the exact terrain that already saw historic flooding levels earlier this summer, when West Virginia experienced torrential rainfall in late July that sent creeks to historic levels, washed out bridges, and prompted multiple water rescues. That ground hasn't had time to fully recover, and hitting it again with another prolonged heavy rain event adds water to a system that's already compromised. This is exactly why the rule about flooded roads matters so much right now. If you're ever in a vehicle and water is rising, do not try to drive through it. Not even if it looks shallow. Fast-moving floodwater only a foot deep can sweep a car off a road. 2 feet of moving water will carry almost any vehicle downstream. More people die in flash floods in the U.S. from vehicle-related incidents than from any other flood cause. When a flash flood warning is issued for your county, That means life-threatening flooding is either happening or imminent, and your job is to move to higher ground immediately and stay there until the warning expires. Now let's get into the tornado side of this threat, because while flooding is the longer duration concern, the tornado risk is real and shouldn't be dismissed just because the pattern isn't screaming a catastrophic outbreak. The Storm Prediction Center has a slight risk of severe storms in place from western Iowa into portions of Ohio, and within that zone, isolated tornadoes cannot be ruled out. A slight risk designation doesn't mean low danger, it means tornadoes are possible. And anyone in that zone should be monitoring forecasts throughout the day and knowing in advance where they'd shelter if a tornado warning were issued. The particular concern is the amount of available wind shear, what allows thunderstorms to organize into rotating supercells. When high atmospheric instability from heat and moisture loading combines with sufficient wind shear, even a storm that doesn't look impressive on radar can produce a tornado with very little warning time. The 2026 severe weather season has already been described by the National Weather Service as extraordinarily active, with the Chicago forecast area alone setting a record for severe thunderstorm and tornado warnings through mid-April. This week's setup fits within that same pattern. If discrete supercells manage to develop in this environment before the larger complex sweeps through and undercuts them, there's a real window for significant, longer-track tornado potential, storms with more time to cross populated areas and intensify before dissipating. Cities that need to be paying the closest attention right now include Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Columbus, Cincinnati, and Indianapolis, along with every smaller community sitting between them. It's worth saying clearly, the damaging wind threat often gets treated as the less scary sibling of tornadoes, when in reality it can be equally or more destructive over a wider area. Straight-line winds in a well-organized thunderstorm complex, or a derecho, can exceed 75 to 80 miles an hour across a swath hundreds of miles long, stripping roofs, snapping large trees at the base, and taking down power lines across enormous areas simultaneously. Power outages from a single derecho event can affect hundreds of thousands of customers, and restoring power in summer heat, particularly during concurrent flooding, can take days. If you have battery backup systems, check them now. If someone in your life depends on electrically powered medical equipment, make sure there's a plan. Beyond the storms and floods, the heat itself is a separate crisis unfolding simultaneously across the southern half of the country. The Weather Prediction Center confirms hazardous heat is forecast across the southeast and southern plains through at least next Saturday, with heat index values expected to reach dangerous levels across portions of the Mid-South, approaching 110 to 115 degrees in some areas. At that point, the human body's ability to cool itself through sweating becomes increasingly compromised, particularly for anyone already dehydrated, working outdoors, elderly, or without air conditioning. Heat is consistently the deadliest weather phenomenon in the United States, killing more people most years than tornadoes, hurricanes, and flooding combined, and it does so quietly. If someone near you in the heat stops sweating, becomes confused, develops slurred speech, or loses consciousness, that's a medical emergency. Call for help immediately, get them into a cool environment, and use ice or cold water on their skin. The Atlantic is also starting to factor into this pattern. Multiple tropical waves are being tracked across the basin, with generally supportive conditions for development in certain areas. The immediate week doesn't present a major direct threat to the continental U.S. from a named storm, but the trajectory of these systems is being watched by the National Hurricane Center and by state and local emergency managers along the Gulf and Atlantic coasts. As we approach the statistical peak of hurricane season in mid-August through mid-September, anyone living within reach of Gulf or Atlantic coastlines should already have a hurricane preparedness plan in place, not one being assembled once a warning is issued. Here's what matters practically. Have multiple ways to receive weather warnings. A weather app is useful, but it won't always notify you in time if your phone is silenced or a warning arrives while you're asleep. A battery-powered NOAA weather radio is one of the most reliable pieces of emergency equipment a household can own, because it broadcasts directly from the National Weather Service and sounds an alarm automatically when a warning is issued for your location. During the overnight hours, when many of this week's storm complexes are expected to be most active, most people won't be watching radar. The weather radio goes off regardless. Know the difference between a watch and a warning. A watch means conditions are favorable for dangerous storms to develop. Stay aware, know where your shelter is, have your plan ready. A warning means the storm is happening or detected on radar right now, and you need to act immediately. For a tornado warning, that means the lowest floor of a sturdy building, an interior room or hallway away from windows, covering yourself from flying debris. Basements are ideal. Interior bathrooms, closets, and hallways on the lowest floor are the next best option. Never shelter in a mobile home during a tornado warning, regardless of how minor the warning seems. It's also worth understanding how tornado warnings actually get issued because it affects how seriously people take them. A significant portion of tornado warnings are issued based on radar signatures indicating rotation within a thunderstorm, a mesocyclone, rather than a confirmed tornado on the ground. This is called a radar-indicated warning, and it gives you more time than waiting for visual confirmation. But it also means some warnings will expire without a tornado ever reaching the ground. That doesn't mean the warning was wrong. The rotation was real, the potential was real. The tornado either didn't lower to the ground, dissipated before reaching the surface, or touched down somewhere unreported. The fact that a tornado didn't touch your specific street isn't evidence the warning was unnecessary. Every one of these warnings this week deserves the same response. Immediate action to reach shelter, not watching from a window, not waiting to see what happens. The atmosphere doesn't care whether anyone was paying attention to the forecast, and it doesn't soften its output for the unprepared. What's set up right now across the Midwest Ohio Valley and broader eastern half of the country over the next several days is the kind of multi-threat, multi-day pattern emergency managers train for specifically because the combination of concurrent hazards, tired infrastructure from earlier summer events, and a public that may have grown somewhat numb to repeated storm alerts creates conditions where preventable harm happens. And there is one more thing to watch closely over the next several days: how quickly conditions change from one location to another. A forecast can describe a broad region, but severe weather is often decided by what happens inside a much smaller corridor. One county can receive several inches of rain while the county next door gets very little. One town can experience damaging winds while another nearby only sees heavy rain. That is why local warnings matter more than the national headline once the storms begin. The large-scale pattern tells us where the ingredients are coming together, but radar, observations, and warnings tell you what is actually happening over your neighborhood. Keep checking those local updates as conditions evolve rather than relying on a forecast you saw several hours earlier. Another concern is the repeated nature of this setup. When storms return day after day, the danger isn't necessarily that every individual storm becomes stronger. The danger is accumulation. Roads become weaker, drainage systems remain full, soil stays saturated, and trees already stressed by previous storms become easier to knock down. That can turn an ordinary thunderstorm into a much bigger problem. A tree that survives the first storm may come down during the second. A creek that stays inside its banks during one round may overflow during the next. A neighborhood that avoids flooding on Monday could find itself underwater after another round arrives Tuesday or Wednesday. For farmers and agricultural communities, repeated heavy rain creates another set of problems. Fields can become too wet to work, crops can suffer from standing water, and additional storms can damage plants that were already stressed by earlier weather. At the same time, areas underneath the heat dome can experience the opposite problem, with extreme temperatures rapidly drying soil and increasing stress on crops and livestock. That contrast is one of the strangest features of this weather pattern. In one part of the country, people are desperate for cooler temperatures and relief from dangerous heat. Hundreds of miles away, other communities are dealing with too much water, flooding, and repeated thunderstorms. The same large atmospheric pattern is producing completely different problems depending on where you live. And the situation can change quickly after sunset. Overnight storms deserve special attention because people are less likely to notice changing skies, hear thunder early, or see rapidly developing clouds. A severe storm arriving at 2 a.m. gives you fewer visual clues than one arriving at 2 p.m. That's why emergency alerts should be enabled even if you normally keep your phone on silent overnight. If you're in an area expecting severe weather tonight, charge your phone before going to bed. Keep a flashlight nearby. Put shoes somewhere you can reach them quickly. During severe storms, broken glass and debris can cover floors, making it dangerous to walk around barefoot after a window breaks or a structure is damaged. And if flooding is possible, move important belongings away from basement floors before the heaviest rain arrives. Do not wait until water is already entering the house. A few minutes of preparation can make a major difference when conditions deteriorate. So keep your alerts on, Keep your emergency plan ready and check conditions before heading outside or getting behind the wheel. The atmosphere is active, the pattern is complicated, and this story is still developing. What happens next will depend on how those ingredients come together over the next several days, and that is exactly why staying informed matters. Stay aware, stay connected to official warnings, and take every watch and warning that comes through your area this week at full face value. If you want to keep following this as it develops, subscribe and turn on notifications.